identified. Senator Paterson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy President. Judging by that contribution, Senator Polley's knowledge of how the coalition party room works is about as detailed as my knowledge of how the Labor Party caucus works. But at least I know that when they meet it is called a caucus and when we meet it is called a party room. But I'm sure Senator Polley's next contribution on this matter will have the correct terminology. I'm very pleased to contribute to this discussion tonight and very pleased for a couple of reasons. First of all, I'm really heartened by the Labor Party's newfound concern and focus on fixing the budget. It's not a concern that they showed very much when they were in government, obviously, given that they turned what was the best set of books in the Western world into the worst set of books in the Western world in just a few years. But it's obviously a concern that they've now discovered. I have to say it's not really a concern they've even had in their first few years in opposition after losing office, because they have fought tooth and nail every single step of the way in an attempt to deny our choices in order to fix the budget, in order to stifle our attempts to bring the budget back to shape. But I am pleased to see that they now do have a concern about fixing the budget. Perhaps we will see in this newfound attitude from the Labor Party a willingness to support some of the savings measures that the government has proposed, but have not been successful in this chamber, in part due to their opposition. Perhaps the government should bring back to the Senate some savings initiatives that were previously rejected by the Senate, given the Labor Party's newfound concern for this issue. And they should be concerned about this issue, as we all should be concerned about this issue, because there is nothing fair at all about giving the next generation the obligations of that this generation wasn't able to meet. There's nothing moral or fair about expecting our children and grandchildren to pick up the tab for the lifestyle that we are leading today and for the expenses that we have failed to meet, because every time the government runs a budget deficit, we are spending money on ourselves today that we have failed to fund adequately. And I believe that is a very unfair thing. And I'm sure with the Labor Party's concern on budget fairness that they will soon reverse their opposition to our savings initiatives and support them to ensure that we can return the budget to surplus more quickly. I'm also pleased to know that they want to make the tax system more fairer, although I am concerned that their policy proposals to do so are somewhat inconsistent with that goal. There's nothing fair about increasing taxes by $150 billion, as the Labor Party proposes to do. They propose to do so by increasing taxes on small business. Do we really think it's fair to increase taxes on small business, as well as medium and large-sized businesses, to the tune of $65 billion, by not supporting the rest of our enterprise tax plan and by reversing the existing tax cuts that we've already delivered to small business as part of our enterprise tax plan? They're planning to increase taxes by $32 billion on housing by scrapping negative gearing, about which I will have more to say in a moment. They're planning on increasing taxes by $13 billion by increasing the capital gains tax, again about which I'll have more to say in a moment. They're planning on increasing taxes on family trusts, or more accurately small businesses and eventually no doubt farmers as well, by $15 billion. They're proposing to increase income taxes on some of the hardest working and most productive Australians by $22 billion. And of course they propose to raise $20 billion more in superannuation than the government currently is, although they haven't specified exactly how they're going to do that. So with more than $150 billion of tax increases, I think we're entitled to ask, how is that delivering a fairer tax system? How is slugging the Australian people more tax than they already pay, which frankly I think is very high by world standards and higher than I would like it to be, a fair thing to do? If we are to ensure the tax system is more fair, there's one way we can do that, and that is by cutting taxes. And I'm proud to be a part of a government which has started to do that, and I look forward to the government being able to do so even more in the future when the budget returns to a state to allow it. Of course, that process will be expedited by, hopefully, the opposition's newfound position of supporting savings measures in the Senate. But of course, if we want to cut taxes in a fair way, then we have to look at who currently pays taxes and who pays the most taxes, and it's only logical that those who are currently shouldering the biggest burden of tax should be those that receive the first and most significant tax cuts if they are to come. I'd like all Australians to have a tax cut, but I'd especially like those Australians who are shouldering a particularly heavy burden of tax at the moment to receive a tax cut. And we know that's particularly those taxpayers who are in the pay-as-you-go tax system, who have high incomes, which is especially highly taxed form of income. Of course, this motion also relates to housing affordability today, and of course it wouldn't be the Labor Party if they didn't think you could roll up a radical change to the tax system to address an unrelated social problem, which of course is the very serious problem of housing affordability. All the best international evidence shows, as I've said in debates like this before, that the most significant factor in the affordability of housing, as Senator Williams alluded to in his contributions earlier, is not of course the price of the house itself, but the price of the land on which it sits. And the best thing that any government can do to ensure that housing becomes more affordable is to make that land more affordable. Of course, how do you make land more affordable? You make more land available, and that will increase the supply of land and decrease the price of land. Of course, unfortunately, that's not something that's within the remit of the federal government to control. That's something that state governments control, and I note for the record that the majority of those governments are of the Labor Party persuasion. So perhaps this motion today is intended to shame those state Labor governments into releasing more land so that the supply of housing can be increased and prices can be reduced, so that young people who want to enter in the housing market, my generation, many of my friends among them, can do so in a more affordable way. Finally, we've seen in this debate, as we often do in these times, references to inequality, which is the catch cry of the Labor Party, which they seem to have picked up from the Greens. There was a very timely research note put out last week, a parliamentary research brief by the good people at the Institute of Public Affairs, who some senators will know I have an association with as my former employer, and Daniel Wild published an excellent publication on the 4 facts about inequality in Australia. And in the interest of full disclosure, I did not work with Mr Wild directly. He joined the IPA after I left, but he published a number of really pertinent facts about the inequality debate, the most important of which is the fact, of course, that inequality, as measured by the most academically accepted reliable measure of inequality, which is the Gini coefficient, has not increased in Australia. In fact, it's decreased. When you rely on both ABS measures and, in the view of this researcher, the superior Hilda measures, which I agree is a more reliable source, it actually shows that income inequality has decreased slightly, I admit, but from 2001, where it was 0.31 to 0.30 in 2015. That is a positive development. It's also worth pointing out that although Australia has wealth which is distributed in an unequal way, like all countries do that have a free enterprise system to some extent, by world standards we are a very equally distributed wealth country. In fact, we are the 3rd most equal in distribution of wealth in the developed world, behind only Japan and Belgium, and that's according to a recent Credit Suisse report. So we are more equal than New Zealand, France, Switzerland, United Kingdom, Netherlands, Germany, United States and Denmark. That is an impressive achievement of Australia.
Thank you, Senator Paterson. Senator